Yeah, my voice goes.
The old Barry White.
Yeah, upon waking up, it starts low and it goes up an octave or two by the end of the day. It's not too many, but but it's certainly a different level now. And when we're talking about being deep and low, Adam, where better to start than with your 2022 Chicago Cubs season preview review, I think.
Something like that. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the Cubs' final week. We're going to talk a little bit about our preseason picks for how the MLB season would go. Look ahead into the wild card matchups. Kevin's already wearing a Chicago Bulls hat, so you can tell where we're at in the Cubs baseball season. But most importantly, if you are here looking for the Joe Madden interview, this is not that. It will be out next week. Monday, we're going to put it out Monday. The book that he has written, The Book of Joe, that he co-wrote with Tom Verducci, that's coming out next week, so they wanted us to wait to post it until then. But I will be putting out a fun little clip today to tease it, in which Joe Madden gives us ball player nicknames that were frankly a lot more creative than many of his nicknames that he gave players, like Stropey and Happy and Rossi and whatever else.
Yeah, it wasn't just those. So he Adam asked if he would mind dubbing us with such nicknames, and he was game for it. He was game for everything. Joe Madden, great hang, turns out, folks. This is a thing, and again, the Joe Madden interview we hung out with him for like 25 minutes, I want to say, and got into it. That's going to be out Monday, and it's believe the hype. He's just exactly like what he is when you see him on TV talking to reporters. And it reminded me of I've compared him. So I have a radio show on Sirius XM 99 every week at 3 p.m. and myself and another comic named Sean Donnelly have a lot of comics on. Adam's been on the show. We have many comics on. There are comedians who aren't famous who just like do not bring it and who seem like inconvenienced by it. And we had Bob Newhart on the show, and he was amazing. And Joe Madden reminded me of that. We've had people much less famous on this show who it was like pulling teeth with, and Joe Madden fucking brought it, and it was no problem. He was a great time, so that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I much in the same way that when Ken and I got to meet Andre Dawson very, very briefly a couple weeks ago, I was already mentally preparing myself for the fact that he had been doing that all day and was probably not going to be super engaging because he was exhausted. And I expected that to some extent with Madden, that he's probably doing a lot of interviews. He's promoting this book. We've already seen him. He, like on Sunday Night Baseball, they did an in-game interview and he was talking about his book. So I was preparing myself emotionally for him to be a little, not rude, but just like okay, this is one of 100 interviews that I've done. He could not have been more engaging. And in our ongoing years-long group chat that we have with our buddy Ken Schultz, I was saying yesterday that one of the coolest things for me is that I don't think I registered like just how much his voice means to me. Like he has been the soundtrack of the best era of Cubs baseball in our lives, and the person who got to give a speech at the World Series parade and to like hear that voice talking back to me was very surreal, and I think you all will enjoy it quite a bit.
Yeah, so that's great. Monday will be a great time hanging out with Joe Madden. Can't wait till you guys hear it. And we're going to have the video unedited up on our YouTube page, too. We are at Away Games Pod on Twitter. On Instagram, we will drop the links, all those places, and put it up on the YouTube page as well. We'll provide those links. But today, I'm Kevin McCaffrey. That's Adam Mamawala. And we are doing... I guess the season review. You want to get us into it, Adam?
Yeah, let's get into it. We kind of Mark Maroned our way into this episode, which is unusual for us. Usually we have the big welcome, but we didn't want to do that for you today. We wanted to kind of just ease into it. Let's start with, so I think we're going to do like a more immersive Cubs debrief at some point.
Sure.
Any impressions, first of all, on the final week of the Cubs season? Obviously, they ended up not losing 90 games. They finished 39-31 in the second half, which is astonishing. And as much as that makes me think, oh, well, maybe they actually could have competed this year, I would rather have them do this than the alternative, which is start 39-31 and then be the worst team in baseball.
Yeah, that I agree. And part of the reason why you'd prefer that is because then in this year's setup, you could sell off at the deadline. which did we do that? I don't even know if we
Ish.
successfully did that. So I don't know. But yeah, it allowed me to emotionally gear shift down on the year in a good way. And yeah, 39-31 after the All-Star break is arbitrary, but undeniably good over that number of games.
Yeah.
So fine. Do I have any impressions from last week of the season? I'd say no. I mean, like I could make up stuff, but no. I mean, Adrian Sampson pitched another good game to close out the year, and I mean, I think he's just made himself a name that we can. You don't know if it's the pitching version of Frank Schwindel's hot second half. Similar age, so similar sort of breakout. But I mean, Sampson has certainly earned himself a roster spot going into next year. So I mean, that's like the number one thing I take.
And he did leave with an injury, but I think it was very much like, hey, this is the last day of the season. Let's not push it.
Yeah.
You could even see his conversation with Ross, where he's like, look, it's not worth it. We're not playing for anything.
Right.
Javier Assad had a really nice start. I don't see him as being a part of the Cubs' future rotationally, but it's still been nice to see him look a bit better. He's kind of confusing. He'll have games where like he only gives up one run or no runs, but he's kind of nibbling and he's not super efficient. So I'm not really sure what to think of him yet.
I mean, his stuff ticked up this year, and then beyond that, obviously he jumped, I think, 3 levels. I want to say I could even be shorting him on that by the end of the year. But he's a guy where I don't think he was a guy who I don't think was on anyone's top. Certainly, I'm not on anyone's top 20 list. I don't think he was on most people's top 30 lists coming into the year. So, maybe there is a jump there. And I think right now, you absolutely can't go into next year thinking he's one of your 5. But I think right now you look at him as someone who you don't mind making a start here and there, and someone who maybe you're slotting it, who jumps in as that like 8th starter or something like that. With Sampson would be ahead of him in that pecking order, obviously. But I think Assad he's one of the success stories of this year. This is a guy who's jumped up, and this is a major league player. So that's great.
I want to be clear that this is a completely above board appropriate question, but how do you feel about Manrod?
How do I feel about Manrod? Do you know, Adam, some days better than others. I think this. I mean, I don't know. Honestly, to be completely honest, I didn't see him like live in many of his games this year, but the stuff is clearly there. Obviously, the velocity is premium, and I want to say, was it his slider he was throwing as a secondary pitch this year?
I believe so. Yeah.
So yeah, I think he's a guy who has a lot of like I think what you would consider as normal stuff, quote unquote. He has he's got plenty of that. He's 26 years old. He's listed on Baseball Savant at 5'11", 210, which I feel like might be a little light on that. I feel like this is a sturdy man. So I don't know, but I think honestly how I feel about Manuel Rodriguez is that the Cubs don't really need to count on him as a top level reliever, as a real high leverage reliever going into next year, which is great because I think he could be, but I also in the slider. So this year his sinker he threw 99 times, slider 70 times, fastball 31 times. So I mean, I think he's a good option, sort of deeper in that bullpen, which was a success this year. The guys they brought into that bullpen.
Yeah, totally. My final thought from the last week was who had Nico Horner hitting 10 home runs before the season started?
I did not. I was thinking about, as I believe I said, to be perfectly honest, I was thinking about taking the under if you gave me like 5.5 homers on him and Madrigal combined. Now Madrigal would have paid out, obviously, but Nico got to the 10 number, and like that's sort of a very arbitrary level of what you want to see from Nico, is just like keeping enough power to keep pitchers a little bit honest and to punish them if they really hang one. And if he's a guy, and Nico obviously missed a good chunk of time, but he hit the ball a lot harder this year and seemed to get the ball up a little bit. If he's if he plays the defense he did at shortstop or elsewhere, and then he's hitting 10 to 15 homers, I think that's great.
Yeah, and as for Madrigal, I mean, I think you talk about the Mandela effect. I don't know that Madrigal even exists.
Does he?
When I think about this season, I seem to remember a game-tying single against the Brewers, and I think that's it.
The most
I
believable.
I went to the 70s. There was a gas shortage and a flock of seagulls. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, the most believable part of that is the single part you said. That sounds right.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking at Nick Madrigal. They're telling me, Fangraphs is telling me he had .2 wins above replacement this year, which feels high. It's tied with Esteban Quiroz.
Well, that incorporates morale. He's a good clubhouse guy.
He seems like a nice guy. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but yeah, the Nico homers, Nico ending that year on 10. I did enjoy that for the roundness of that number.
Would have been cool to see Hap get to 20. I think he ended with 17 or 18. Nice to see the Franimal go deep in his final game. I mean, it doesn't matter at all, but it's nice to end the season on a win, especially one where they scored. I think they tied themselves for the most runs they had scored in a game this year, 15 runs, which is fun.
Or they had the one game against Pittsburgh where they put up 21.
Oh, right, that weird anomalous game where they had they spread it out, they would have had a much better week, but they just won in classic Cubs fashion. It's like, we're going to win by 20 and then lose the next 5 games by 1 run.
Yeah. So, yeah, they put up a 15-2 win over Cincinnati at the end. And there was someone arguing with us in our Twitter mentions at Away Games Pod earlier in the year when we were talking about how the NL Central is a bad division, and just he thought it was so stupid that we would say the NL Central is a bad division. Well, folks, the Cubs won 74 games and finished third, and the 2 teams beneath them were the second and third worst teams in the league overall.
Right.
It's a shit
division.
division.
A year where there are more playoff teams, 1 team is in the playoffs.
Yeah, it was pretty nice to watch the Brewers just tank their way out of the playoffs at the end, out of the expanded playoffs. So the Brewers and the Cubs are playing the same number of postseason games this year, and that is enjoyable, I must say.
Dude, the Marlins are always such classic spoilers. I feel like that's maybe it's just because they're always bad, so they're always in that position that I have this bias. But they played the Mets really hard. They effectively knocked the Brewers out of the playoffs, and the Phillies were doing everything they could to remove themselves from the equation, and the Brewers just couldn't get it done. So
the Brewers tried harder. The Brewers just really managed to get that loss done. So
well, listen, if we're frustrated as Cubs fans, how do you think Brewers fans feel when they absolutely could have won the division, did nothing in the offseason, and then traded Hader away?
Yeah, the hate. I mean, I can understand the Hader trade. I don't really agree with it, even though I dislike Josh Hader. Even though we also have some people messaging us about leave Hader alone. But I think
okay, never got back to us. I can't imagine why.
It's weird. That's why I don't know why. But I understand why everyone in that clubhouse would be pissed about that. And the problem is they will not spend. They have not spent in the past couple of years. They signed Yelich to that huge deal, which was understandable at the time, but he's been bang on average since then. Well, by the way, Yu Darvish, who doesn't need no one needs help facing Yu Darvish. Yu is probably starting game 1 for the playoff Padres. Still good. Yu Darvish, still good. Still on the contract the Cubs had him under, guys. So FYI, so that's he would upsetting. Be nice to have. It's very upsetting, but but this division ended up only the Cardinals in those playoffs.
All right, well, if you are up for it, why don't we get to kind of what we thought the MLB season would look like, and then give a look ahead to this wild card weekend. Now, you said you had our win totals that we predicted. I must have, maybe I listened to a different old podcast. I listened to one that we called the 2022 season preview. Did we actually write down our exact win totals of every team at some point?
Oh, not every team, just the Cubs.
Oh, what did you say for the Cubs? Or what did we say for the Cubs?
So we were both very close. So the actual record of the Cubs was 74 and 88.
Yeah.
And Adam, you predicted they would go 75 and 86, and there would be a rain-out game that they did not make up because they were irrelevant. So that's
it's a very specific prediction there.
It is, but that's very close. Obviously, 1.5 games off, I suppose, if we're going to rank it that way. And myself and Ken both predicted that the Cubs would win 72 games.
Wow, you hit the under.
So we hit the under. Ken and I were both 2 wins under. You were 1 win over the actual record, but basically they are who we thought they were.
Just in a circuitous way, but they
Mhm.
ultimately are kind of right where we expected. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's funny.
exactly. This was not a playoff team coming into the year, and they succeeded at being the team they were. I mean, this is
Right.
obviously they had the super hot second half, all things considered, but there's some randomness in there, just like there was some randomness to how bad they were in the first half,
Right.
that maybe not a true read on how bad they
Hmm.
were or how good they were. But I think at the end of the year, after 162, this is the team that they built. This is
Right.
74 and 88 seems exactly right. This team was not a playoff team
No.
unless they just got wildly lucky in every possible different way. So this team wasn't constructed for the playoffs, and they succeeded in not making it.
All right, let's go through our predictions. I don't know how well you remember these. This was a surprise to me listening back to it last night.
Mm.
So starting with the NL Central, I was a little surprised that both of us predicted the Brewers to win the division. So
Mm-hmm.
both of us had the same order. We had Brewers, Cardinals, Cubs, Reds, Pirates. So we were mostly right, but you flip-flop the Brewers and the Cardinals.
Top two, yeah.
But we both mentioned that like we thought that the Brewers should have done more, and if anything was going to hold them back, it was the fact that they didn't go out and get like a Schwarber or a Castellanos or someone that
Mm-hmm.
they could have signed to kind of a bigger,
Right.
a bigger value, shorter year deal, which they certainly could have done, I think.
Oh yeah, and I mean, if you put Schwarber on that team, Schwarber who led the NL in home runs with 46, I want to say.
Jesus Christ.
So I finished second in the majors in home runs behind your boy Aaron Judge with his famous 62. So I think. Yeah, I mean, I think if you put Schwarber on that Brewers team, let's see how close. Well, the Brewers ended up, let's see, 7 games behind the Cardinals, of course, and the Brewers ended up 1 game out of the wild card. So if you put Schwarber on that team, I think Milwaukee just
Yeah.
makes it. Oh, especially because the team they were closest to was Philadelphia. So I mean, where
Right.
Schwarber ended up. So I mean, that is Kyle Schwarber could have flipped the playoffs scenario this year.
Wow.
And this is why you should spend. Every team has the money to spend, and the Brewers did not. So
They did not. In the NL East, you had Mets, Braves, Phillies. So you're pretty much, you're about as right as you could be. They tied at the
Right.
top. The
Mets
Braves were the tiebreaker.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
The Mets were in first all year until the last 3 games. So
I talked to my buddy Adam about this, my Mets friend, and I told him it did remind me a bit of the 2018 Cubs, and
Yeah.
I hope for his sake that the Mets have a better fate than that. They certainly have a difficult route to get through the playoffs now, but yeah, it sucks. I mean, 101 wins, certainly 95
crazy.
wins for the Cubs that year is usually enough to get the job done. But when another team just gets stupid hot, it's not like the Mets. I mean, obviously getting swept by the Cubs didn't help, and a few other things that happened, but I don't think the Mets choked necessarily. That getting swept in Atlanta was brutal, but
Mhm.
Atlanta's not an easy team, and the series was in Atlanta. So anyway, I actually, and I didn't remember this, I had the Phillies winning the division.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's
I mean, they had a run, I want to say maybe in the middle of the year where they got pretty close when the Mets were super hot. There might have been a time sort of midway in the year when the Phillies were hopping over the Braves too. But yeah,
They had a weird year. They were like out of it for a while, and then they, I think after the Cubs swept them the first time, there was a lot of hemming and hawing of like, what the hell are we doing?
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like after the deadline, they really picked it up, and also they were without Bryce Harper for parts of the year, so
Mhm.
that factored in as well.
It's interesting. So Aaron Nola had a sneaky, fantastic year. His strikeout to walk ratio was bananas. It was historic. Like I think I want to say he had less than 30 walks and well over 200 strikeouts. So, and no one had done that in a long time. So Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler just came back. Healthy, just he's playing again at least.
Right.
So the Phillies are a weird team where it's like you get Nola and Wheeler going a number of times. You got Syndergaard maybe slotting in after that somewhere who's been, he can be very good. And then obviously that top end offense that they have the ability to put together, Real Muto, Harper, Schwarber, Castellanos hasn't had a great year, but as we know, he can get super hot. They can be a dangerous team.
Yeah. In the NL West, we both said, we didn't kind of round it out, but we both said Dodgers, Padres, Giants. So we were, I guess, right about that.
Yep.
We also both said, it seems crazy to say, but I can't imagine the Dodgers not winning 100 games. You said, I think they'll win 105 games. They won 111 games.
Yeah,
that's
that's
how
a
good
lot.
the Dodgers are. Let me go to the AL, and then we'll circle back around to what we said about the playoffs.
Yeah,
In
Dodgers
the
ending up
AL
5 games. I'll just say 5 games off the all-time record pretty quietly this year.
incredibly quietly, as
Yeah.
quietly as Trout hitting 40 home runs,
Yeah.
the 40th of which traveled 490 feet. Did you see that video yesterday?
Yeah, I felt like
If you
I
go
missed where
upper
it
deck
landed.
in center field in Oakland,
Yeah,
absurd.
It is funny.
It's like
that
the baggy in the old Minnesota stadium.
Right. It's funny that it was like the last game of the year, so Trout just decided to swing as hard as he could. It seemed like, So yeah, pretty great.
Unbelievable. All right. In the AL Central, we both were wrong the same way. We both thought the White Sox would win the division. We had the Twins in second. We didn't. We kind of did like a weird episode where we didn't fully list like these are the 5 teams in order. But so
Yeah,
we
who
both
cares?
thought the White Sox would win. Yeah, whatever. AL West. I predicted Astros, Mariners, Rangers. You predicted Astros, Mariners, Angels, Rangers, A's, which I think is exactly right. I also interestingly speculated that if the Angels missed the playoffs, Madden would be gone. Turns out it didn't even take that long.
Nope.
But let's be clear about the fact that we love Joe Madden. And
Yes.
hopefully he manages the White Sox next year. Who can say?
Yeah.
AL East, we again were both wrong the same way in the sense that like everyone was wrong about the Orioles, and we all assumed they would lose 100 plus.
Oh,
games.
sure. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I bet them on the under, and I bet a 3 division winner parlay that the White Sox jobbed me out of. So that's on me for betting on the White Sox, but
Now this surprised me. We both picked the Blue Jays to win the AL East. So I had Blue Jays, Red Sox, Yankees, Rays, Orioles. So really off base on the Red Sox. You had Blue Jays, Yankees, Red Sox, Rays, Orioles. So we both thought the Red Sox would be better than they were. I think a lot of people did. But yeah, I'm shocked at myself that I put the Yankees in third. But it is also shocking that the Yankees didn't win 100 games given how they started. They finished with 99, which is great, but also when you consider how they began, not so great.
Yeah, their second half was difficult until I think in the last couple weeks they started getting back around to playing at a winning clip. But I mean, they were a good month and a half, 6 weeks into the second half, they had a losing record in that half. So I mean, could be like that 2016 Cubs midseason swoon a little bit, and then they come back from because Garrett.
Yeah, but that was an extended swoon. That was like 2 months of swooning.
Yeah, it was like 40 games in this case or something.
Yeah.
So, but Garrett Cole, talking about quiet things, quietly set the Yankees strikeout record for a single season. And I think no one's really been talking about Garrett Cole. So that's
well, he's been a bit overshadowed by his own teammate, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So for the playoffs, my memory of this is that we recorded it before we knew that the playoffs had been expanded in the way that they were. But I will just give you our final 4 teams. So in the NL. You had a Mets Dodgers NLCS with the Mets winning. I had a Phillies Dodgers NLCS with the Dodgers winning the NL. And then in the AL, you had a White Sox Blue Jays ALCS with the White Sox getting to the World Series.
Not loving that.
And I had an Astros Blue Jays ALCS with the Blue Jays getting to the World Series. Then your World Series prediction was Mets over White Sox. Mine was Dodgers over Blue Jays. I don't know if I would stick with that. I might stick with the Dodgers winning. Not that was so courageous 6 months ago. But that is what we predicted. So obviously, I mean, the White Sox disappointed everyone, most of all White Sox fans. And I don't know that I would stick with those predictions. I don't think the Phillies are going to get to the LCS, but who can say? Any thoughts on that before we predict these wild card matchups?
Yeah, I mean, White Sox aren't going anywhere. Obviously, they are out. So that's not a great call on my part. But I mean, I think there's a very good chance that the Mets go very far, just depending on how healthy those top 2 guys are. And if Chris Bassett can fill in that sort of third starter spot and just stay solid, losing Starling Marte has been a huge loss for them. But yeah, I think DeGrom and Scherzer can just put up a bunch of zeros. So who knows?
Right. All right. So the wild card matchups are as follows. We've got Tampa Bay at Cleveland, a series that is so not compelling that they are almost starting the games in the morning. All of the times they've been assigned are 12:07. 12:07 is when these games begin.
Eastern. So
Eastern,
these are 9 a.m. Pacific baseball playoff
Yeah,
starts.
so to all you West Coast Rays fans, all two of you,
does one exist?
It's going to be an early morning. So we've got Tampa Bay at Cleveland. We've got Philly at St. Louis. We've got Seattle at Toronto. We've got San Diego at New York. Once again, all three games, if it goes 3 games, are played in the home team's stadium.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with Tampa Bay, Cleveland. It's tough to pick road teams in this format. I'm picking Tampa Bay. Who do you have?
Yeah, I think Tampa Bay is better. And I sort of, when I was between Tampa or Boston for my last NL East playoff spot in the predictions, I went Boston because I just don't enjoy how the Rays make such a game out of never paying a player.
Right.
Basically, like they're very smart. They're a very smart team, obviously, a very smart organization, and they could be an absolute juggernaut if they paid anybody near what they were worth. So I just, from a labor standpoint, I really dislike that about that team. So I never root for them, but I do think they're better than Cleveland, even though Cleveland's good. They're
pesky.
They're pesky, and Bieber and McKenzie are some very good starting pitchers who can win you some games. But I'll say Tampa in like in a 3-1 scenario, or in I guess a 2-1 scenario.
Okay, so Tampa wins in a deciding game.
Yeah.
Then we've got Philly at St. Louis. Goes without saying that we would rather see the Phillies win. I unfortunately see the Cardinals winning the series. Now Philly does have a great rotation. They've got Wheeler in game 1. They've got Nola in game 2. St. Louis doesn't even have their starters listed yet, but it just. I know that the baseball gods are not gonna let me just see the Cardinals get eliminated early on. There's gonna be some sort of bullshit voodoo magic, which we actually also talked about in our season preview, was like, there's gonna be something funky where Yachty and Wainwright and Pujols are all playing, and it's the Cardinals, so like everything's gonna work out for them. And it did in ways that we could never have even predicted.
Yeah, Pujols going
I would
nuts.
love to see the Phillies win. I think St. Louis probably wins in 3.
I think, I'm having the. I think I'm picking the Phillies here. I'm going behind that pitching. I'm picking more with my head than my heart. My heart knowing that group of old dudes for the Cardinals are probably going to keep playing into October. But I could absolutely see. I mean, you just have Nola Wheeler shut him out right off the top, and you could really get somewhere.
Then we have Seattle at Toronto, which is a kind of a bummer series because I would be fine to see both of those teams advance. I would love to see Seattle advance, especially because while they have finally made it back to the playoffs, they won't even get to host a playoff game in this first round, which sucks. Right. I kind of think that they may be too exhausted from having gotten here and all of the emotions involved to get past a good Blue Jays team, especially playing those games in Toronto, which is a notoriously wild playoff atmosphere. So I'm going to take Toronto. I'm going to take Toronto in 2 games. Yeah. But I hope I'm wrong because I would love to see Seattle make a run at it.
Yeah, these are 2 of the more fun teams, and I'm also would love to see Seattle. They've always been one of my favorite American League franchises, but I will also be going Toronto.
And then this is, I mean, for sure, in my opinion, the spiciest matchup, the Padres at the Mets. Obviously, a tumultuous year for the Padres in which Tatis was out and then was going to come back, and then he didn't. Traded for Soto. The Mets didn't do a lot of the trade deadline, but were dominant all year. They have Scherzer lined up in game 1. They have not decided who, but I mean, game 1 is Darvish versus Scherzer. So if you are a fan of pitching, you should probably watch that game on Friday. This is really tough, man, but I'm going to go with the Mets. I'm very curious to see what they do. Like, if they win game 1, do they go Bassett game 2?
I think that's the plan. I was talking to some Mets fans. Basically, they want to only use DeGrom in this first round if they have to, so they can have DeGrom start game 1 against the Dodgers and then pitch maybe 3 times against the Dodgers in a series. So.
Do you have the Mets winning?
I do. Yeah, I do have the Mets winning. I think, not having Marte is a huge blow, as we said.
Right.
He's just a great player. He's a Mets. My Mets friend Brock was telling me about how, by the numbers, Marte stacks up as one of the very best hitters in baseball against elite pitching, specifically in a weird way. So that's a huge loss. And if Marte was there, I'd feel a lot better about them getting all the way to the World Series and more. But I still think the magic of DeGrom and Scherzer can be a lot, and they're home, and we know Citi Field can be a rowdy place for away teams to be, and the Padres are still kind of like, I don't know. It feels like they're still new to the playoffs, even though, because they weren't there last year, right? And then they were the year before with their very spicy Dodgers matchup, which would be whoever wins the series is facing the Dodgers, so it'll be an exciting next round regardless. But
Wait, did they say Marte was out the whole playoffs?
I mean, I think he's not coming back anytime soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I did see one kind of Mets angle about how this all played out that certainly is biased by them wanting this to be true. But the point they were making is maybe it's not such a bad thing if you get through this first round to play the Dodgers in a best of 5, because the Dodgers are as good as the Mets and Braves are. I think the consensus is that the Dodgers are still the best team in the NL. I don't think anyone will fight you on that. So there's a case to be made that playing them in a 5-game series is actually better than playing them in a 7-game series, because generally speaking, over a longer series, the better team wins.
For sure.
So especially if the Mets can win the first 2 games and not have to use DeGrom, you get DeGrom lined up game 1 in LA. Even if you split those first 2 games in LA, you get to come back and have Scherzer in game 3. And then if you win that, you're a win away from getting to the LCS. So
yeah, and DeGrom's coming back.
I feel that way. Yeah. Like if the Cubs were in, I would rather face the Dodgers in 5 games than 7, because they're a better team.
And it could set up a real NL East Royal Rumble in a Mets Braves NLCS, which would be, those teams hate each other. So,
or Mets Phillies. I don't think it's going to happen, but
right. Yeah, that's true. But both Easts with 3 teams in these playoff scenarios, and both Centrals with only 1, the worst divisions in baseball.
And shout out to Best Fans in Baseball in St. Louis. Tickets as low as $16 for tomorrow's matchup.
$16. Get in there. Get it. Go say goodbye to your old daddies. Go say wave goodbye to those folks.
I guess that speaks to the fact that when you're in the playoffs every year, it's not quite as special. So
yeah,
I guess.
I do. I mean, yeah, I do get it to some degree, but I think it never got quite like that in Wrigley.
No, but hopefully sometime soon.
Yeah.
You got anything else before we wrap this up?
Nope. Just the Joe Madden podcast coming out on Monday. Check that out. Follow us at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram and all those things. Adam's going to be dropping a video clip from the Madden thing, and we'll drop that kind of bonus episode for you on Monday, and it'll be a lot of fun.
All right. Later.
Later.